Other interesting business news, General Motors is pulling the plug on their EV robotaxi, pun obviously intended. Now this comes to us thanks to CNN Business, which somehow still in business. Pretty sure they have layoffs left and right, but somehow still in business. Specifically, we want to credit this to Chris, who's a writer there, specifically Chris Isilidor. I don't think he's related to the Lord of the Rings, although perhaps times are so tough in Middle Earth, he has to resort to working at CNN. That'd be horrifying, worse than going to the Mount Sauron. But I partially digress. Here you can see the, oh, I'm sorry, the bastardized Chevy vehicle there. Oh, yeah, the Chevy Cruze, which was the dumbest name of all time in terms of, I guess it's not peak moronicness in terms of GM doesn't currently sell the Chevy Cruze, which I thought was a fun, well, I'm biased as my first car. I love my little Chevy Cruze Eco with the stick shift. You even hear the turbo spool up. You've got the cold air intake. Made me smell ear to ear every time I press the accelerator. But then it would not accelerate too much, so I would then, not smile as much. But in all seriousness, GM used to make a car called the Chevy Cruze. And then they have this company that they're partnering with called Cruze. Now, the Cruze that GM sold was Cruze. Well, this is spelled Cruise. But I still thought it was kind of silly to have a name that you're going to be using in reference, which, again, they don't make the Chevy Cruze anymore. But they still have parts replacements and recall notices. They have a lot of those. So I thought it was silly to have two names so closely associated together. Now here, you're going to see it with about 20 different cameras bolted on the top of the little EV. It looks like a sedan, but it's hilarious. It's a sedan, but it's as large as like my regular Civic Coupe, but I digress. Now they say, quote, General Motors is pulling the plug on its efforts to develop a fleet of driverless taxis and will focus on driver assistance features that require a driver to be ready to take control of the vehicle, which I don't want to say is above their pay grade, but no, I think it did actually, if you watch the old videos, because again, the amount of research, development, and execution and proficiency you need to actually do a driverless vehicle, you have to be a tech company. You have to have the best people on the planet, and even then, there's a large margin of error, and yeah, let's just say GM has none of that. They have some good employees, don't get me wrong. I got family members on both sides of the union, assembling cars and managing it. And they got some good folks over there, don't get me wrong. But yeah, in terms of GM being in the breaking edge of technology, wanting to be an EV company, I'm so skeptical of that. I mean, I mean, they have enough recalls as is. I can't imagine them giving more. And to prove my point, they had a massive recall with this, where it's so bad because there's a couple impact incident with this vehicle. Well, was it San Francisco? They actually shut down all operations for GM, so they couldn't do any more. They couldn't work anymore in that city with this vehicle. The competitors could, but yeah, GM was boxed out. They say, quote, GM is dropping robotaxi efforts, quote, given the considerable time and resources that would be needed to scale the business, along with an increasingly competitive robotaxi market. This is according to a statement from General Motors themselves, because, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not a gambling man, but if I were to be a gambling man, I would say the most successful, most likely outcome is Google will win. I think they call theirs the Waymo or Waymo, something silly. But when you have a company with nearly comparatively unlimited resource allocation, I mean, GM cannot outspend Google. They cannot compete with Google. They can't even hold a flame. And I'm not a fan of Google. I think they're one of the most biased, quite frankly, one of the most evil companies out there. I always stream and post on rumble.com, the much better alternatives, as well as the Spotify and the Apple podcast. But I partially digress. You can't, and Google could also afford to have a loss leader for a while too, to absorb market share. So yeah, I think this, I usually have GM being half the business blunders of the show. But yeah, in this case, I think Mario Barra is making the right call. Pull the plug on this. You can't compete. You don't have the money. You don't have the talent. You don't have the resource allocation. So yeah, it makes sense for them to stop this silly initiative. They can't compete. Also, that looks like a monstrosity on wheels, but that's aside the fact. I mean, even Google's using a Jaguar EV SUV. The styling is half the battle. Well, not really, but I digress. They say, quote, the Detroit-based automaker's robotaxi efforts have been run by a company called Cruze, which GM owns 90% of the company. Many of the Cruze employees who have been working on self-driving technology will be shifted over to GM. I don't think they intended that to be a pun, but I like to think that was a pun intended. They'll shift over to GM, although they only make 2 stick shifts, I partially digress, to work on driver assist features for privately owned cars such as this. What? Such as the Super Cruise, a hands-off, eyes-on driving feature that is not offered on more than 20 GM vehicles. GM said the move will cut cost approximately $1 billion annually after the competition is complete, which, yeah, they're going to need every penny they can to compete with China and the ever-growing, just BYD being the biggest competitor, I think, in terms of the EV future, as well as Tesla. Now, GM faces competition in the robotaxi market space from Google's Waymo. So it is Waymo. I'm sorry, how are there not 58 puns that call it Laymo? But I digress. Which they also have a partnership with Uber, but GM decided it can no longer make sense to compete with the sector. CEO Mary Barra told investors the company decided robotaxi service is not in parts its core business, and that shifting its self-driving technology efforts to driver assist features will help the products it offers to car buyers, which, quite frankly, I agree. I also know that last month, Cruise agreed to pay $500,000 fine as part of a deferred prosecution agreement that resolved potential federal crime charges for providing a false record to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration about an incident in which, where was this? That was in 2023, in which, one of their cars hit a pedestrian in San Francisco and dragged the woman along for 20 feet, which, that's GM engineering. That's why you don't want them to make these robot cars. They might inadvertently create Terminator, only it would be such an inept Terminator it would fall down or something comically. I don't know. Of all the things that GM's done, I think getting out of this market is the best call for the company. I mean, shoot, I think they should focus on making reliable, fun cars. They don't make either of those things yet, but someday they might. I think that'd be a good niche for them to go after. But I mean, let me know if you had a choice. You have to go into a driverless vehicle. What would you trust? Something like a Tesla, maybe the Google car, or maybe China's BYD, or would you trust General Motors? Let me know your thoughts are in the comments, because as always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Thank you everyone for taking the time to tune in today. Again, trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by Christmas, so if you can click that button, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or comment. It's a great way to give me a little additional feedback, letting me know how I can make the show better and better. Lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.